Friends, today's episode is going to be packed with insights from someone who's truly a disruptor in the branding world. We're talking to Kristen Graham Brown, the founder and CEO of Hoot Design Company, a culture-driven branding agency that's been reshaping how brands see themselves and how they are seen for the last 14 years. Kristen built Hoot with a clear vision to empower brands, particularly disruptors, to move culture forward. Her team of 10 is at the forefront of crafting impactful, authentic brand identities that don't just look good, they challenge the status quo and make real connections. In today's conversation, we'll dive into the principles that fuel her branding philosophy, the step-by-step process her agency takes with new clients, and some of the biggest branding mistakes she sees companies make and how to avoid them. Plus, she's going to share her powerful success story of how Hoot transformed a brand in a big way. So whether you're a business owner, a marketing pro, or just curious about how branding can make an impact on culture, you don't want to miss this one. So let's dive in. Kristen, welcome to the pod.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
I appreciate your time. So let's dive in and give the listeners what they came here for. Let's start out with hearing about your journey and what led you to becoming the founder and CEO of your firm.
Yeah, so like you said, we are 14 years old, and about 14 years ago, I moved back to this area from being at an ad agency in Chicago. And that's always what I knew I wanted to do. Even when I was like 12, I knew I wanted to be in advertising, and I loved it. But when I had the opportunity to move back here, really for my husband's job, I thought, this was a good time to try doing my own thing because the cost of living is so much lower. And then, of course, growing up here, I thought that I'd have more connections, coming out of the gate. So in the beginning, we were really I would call it a boutique papery. So we were quite different than what we do now. Even though my background was in advertising, I think the grass is always greener. And I was kind of like burnt out from clients, thinking I'm just going to make my own artwork and people will buy it and I'll do custom artwork for people. And turns out that was way more difficult than I had imagined. Working with, direct to consumer, I think is another whole ball of wax versus being like B2B, which is what I do now. And so for I would say the first 5 years, really until about 2015, we did a ton of that paper and even event paper. So like weddings, huge events at VU at the time was coming up here in this area. And so right around 2015, we had this big pivot where I was like, I either need to get a job somewhere else or I need to do this the right way, which was a big up-leveling moment for me in 2015, which, is 5 years in. So it was definitely a slow roll, I would say. And then in 2018, so in 15, we pivoted to be like, we're an ad agency, like I had been before. And then in 18, we niched down a little bit to become a branding agency, which is the iteration of the agency that you see today. I mean, lots of changes, of course. It's a total roller coaster ride, but, we have been a branding agency since 2018.
Okay, gosh, that's so interesting. And I didn't know that. And for our listeners, when she's mentioning where she's at, Kristen's headquarters is in Columbia, Missouri, which is where we met, where I lived before. And if you've seen anything with my brand, Salt and Light Advisors, Kristen's team helped develop that brand and has been excellent. And so I've got some, backstory there as far as a client perspective. But I love that you all started and then pivoted in that way, because so many businesses, I think, start out and they're like, no, this is what I said I was going to do. And they stick their heels in and then they fail potentially, or they don't receive or reach the potential that they could have. So good for you for that pivot. At the time, how big was your team when you did that?
Oh, quite small. So I think we had it was 4 people, including me. And yeah, to me, it was really clear because I started to hate Mondays, and I was like, I created this thing, I own this thing. So I have no one to blame but myself. And another thing that was interesting at the time, I was also an adjunct at Stevens. And I thought, okay, well, I'm going to have this like funnel of interns. They're always going to want to work on weddings. It's kind of like the time they are in their life. And that turned out not to be true too. I really saw kind of a turn around that time, around this weddings. It wasn't purpose driven enough for me. And I don't think then I was an inspirational leader either. So really, I shouldn't have been surprised that no one else wanted to work on them either. I do think weddings, are really a challenging time in people's lives. It doesn't bring out the best in people. But you can really feel when it's not purpose driven anymore. Like I felt like I don't care what color envelope you choose. Well, that's not fair. They're paying you a lot of money to brand this event, to like take this event to the next level. So I knew when I was like, I hated talking about this stuff. I didn't care. I didn't, I hated Mondays. I was like, it's time to pivot. So yeah, I would encourage anybody who's having that. Like if it's been a while and you still hate it, I would say you absolutely need to pivot because people can feel that. Employees and clients can definitely feel it.
So, regarding your employees, did you salvage members from that original team, or was there kind of a parting of ways when you decided to pivot?
Oh yeah, they were very on board. So the team at the time was
Cool.
like great. We had kind of, I would say probably 30% of our business was always in like the comm space, like strategic communication space. But then 70% of it was like the wedding, the event paper, the custom prints, stuff like that. So it was really a flip, right? It was like, okay, we're going to start saying no to that, which that was surprising to me too. That was very easy. It wasn't like people were like beating down my door for me to help them with their weddings or anything. It was basically like, okay, the website has a new look and feel. What we're going to message is totally different. And it was literally a very seamless transition into like, we're a full-blown ad agency. I could lean on my past experience, which was really helpful as far as like, proof that I had experience doing that kind of work. I mean, yeah, I think they were very happy for the change. I think weddings are just it is not people at their best, is what I would. It doesn't bring out the best in people. So then for your employees, that's really hard,
Yeah,
especially younger people who are new to the workforce.
I had not thought about any of that, but yeah, that is a time where a lot of times you're spending more money than what you have, and that causes some angst. And so, yes, that's so
Absolutely.
interesting.
Lots of family dynamics.
Yeah. So I loved learning through my process with my organization. I loved learning about brand from you all. And since then, I've dug deeper on your website. I follow you all, follow your Parliament newsletter, and all of that. We'll make sure to let people know how to find that. But I love learning about your philosophy. So can you share with the listeners the core principles that now drive your branding philosophy?
Yes, absolutely. So, and this is all over our website, but you can see that our philosophy is that brand is the being and marketing is the doing. And a lot of people, it's so easy to get caught up in the doing, which is like the tactical stuff, right? Like, I want to launch my website. I want to start a podcast, for example. I want to, everyone thinks they need to be on social. They dedicate a ton of time to social without identifying first the being, like who you are, what you believe in, who you're for, and why they should care. That is a total waste of time. It is truly a waste of time. So that is transactional. Like I heard this thing recently I thought was so good. It was like, marketing is about making you rich and famous. That's about the two things that you need to be doing is getting, and to me, getting famous is just another way of saying brand awareness, right? Being well known. And without that first, your dollars work so much less effectively for you when you go out to do the tactical work. So our entire philosophy is do this foundational thing first, then we deal with tactics. And it's just shocking to me how many people run down the road of the doing, which can be very expensive, without identifying the being first. Like, what is your point of difference? If you go, people will not know their point of difference or your core values. A lot of people will say, oh, I don't need values. It's only me and a couple of other people. I totally disagree. As soon as you start, you want to know for yourself, for your own clarity, what are my values? What do I believe in? And then of course, those impact the clients and customers too. And they should be driving all of the behavior behind the business. So our process starts with something called brand heart, which is vision, purpose, and values. Then we move into positioning, which is your point of difference and who you're for, your audience. We call it the brand advocate. And then lastly, we do personality, which is what you look and sound like, which is what a lot of people believe brand. Truly, that should be, the last thing that you do after this foundational work is complete.
Yeah, I love that. And I had the opportunity to hear you speak last year at the Main Street Summit, and you dove a little bit deeper into that. But most recently we have a shared client and I saw this in action. And I would love it if you would talk a little bit about on brand behavior and why you all have kind of developed language around that and then how you guide a client through that.
Absolutely. Well, the main reason that this is such a problem is because often in founder led companies, which is a lot of the people that we work with are founder led between 2 to 10 million in revenue. They are the brand barometer. So everything has to run through them. And not even just content creation or marketing, but even big decision making and management, the management of on brand behavior, because none of this has ever been clarified or put in writing. And as founders, we often feel like, isn't this obvious? Because this is intuitive to you. It's baked in. It's who you are. So you almost can't comprehend that other people don't get this. But I think that's, I read in Unreasonable Hospitality, which is such a good book.
So good.
Language gives intention to intuition. So what is intuitive to you is not to others, especially when you go to scale. So this becomes a real, linchpin in the ability for a firm or a 40-person business like the one we're talking about in their ability to scale. Because you might even have a few people at the top who are really lockstep with the owner, with the founder, and it's intuitive to them as well. But when we start to need to scale and we need to recruit the right people, we need to be able to message what makes us different. And that, I think it starts internally, like literally, who am I? What do I believe in? And then also, how do we behave? What are our products and strategies, and who are we for? And then lastly, the what we look and sound like. So I truly believe, brand is a huge component of building your culture, and then culture delivers on your brand. Because if you have misalignment internally, clients or customers will never be treated in an on-brand way. So you eventually you will not scale if you do not get this out. Another huge component of this, I think, too, is like, you want to take yourself, your founder self, out of this like job of being like the czar, right? Because you don't want this to be like, well, does Tom like it? We just do whatever Tom likes. And you want to build strategy around this so that it's not so subjective. It's not just like, oh, we caught Tom on a bad day. That's the opposite of what we want. We want the scaffolding for on-brand behavior and production all the time out, and then which truly sets an owner free, which is what most owners are looking for: freedom of time, and then of course freedom because of success monetarily.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And it's one of the first times, even though I've worked in corporate for 20 years and I've worked in distribution, finance and education and insurance and M&A, I had never partnered with a marketing department, whether that was a 50-person company or I was also at a 20,000 person organization. And I had never partnered with a marketing department successfully. And me always being in HR. And when I met you all and started looking into your philosophy, I was like, it's internal comms. Oh my gosh, like, look, they care about HR, because it does start with the recruitment process. It's not just client focused, it's recruitment focused as well. And so I just love that. I think it's excellent. Have you all had trouble selling that because it's more of an abstract thought for companies?
Oh, absolutely. I think that, someone said to me once, like, you want to be the painkiller, not the vitamin. And I think a lot of people see us as the vitamin. This is a nice to have, not a need to have. If I could convince people, it's absolutely a need to have, which I actually think that AI is going to help me with this, which is, very counterintuitive, because a lot of people, I think, in our space, in the communication space, are like, oh, our jobs are going away. I really don't feel that way for what we do, because AI can help you leverage your brand in a way that is unparalleled to anything we've seen before. But you must have that brand. And so now when I go to people and say, like, look at this brand book you're going to get from us, which defines who you are and, all the things I was just talking about. And you can literally upload this PDF to Claude, that's the AI platform I prefer. It changes everything. So instead of people being like, so all I get is this PDF, this PDF just became utterly transformational to your marketing team, either to make them much more effective if it's a lean team, or even a lot of times what I see is a junior person, right? So you have someone who's maybe fresh out of school, and like we have to be able to distill down, maybe for me, 14 years of business ownership into something that they can provide them with clarity and inspiration, and helps them actually harness AI to do their job better, that's what we actually presented on at Main Street this year, was that like AI can, like right now, for example, we have a client who was thinking about hiring a copywriter. So a business that not the type of thing that we do where we actually do need a copywriter, but just like a regular business service provider. I would never hire a copywriter right now as an internal team member, because it is totally unnecessary. If you have identified the B, you do not need that, because the I would say like the fuel, the gasoline that AI makes that specific job, I would say, obsolete now.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit more about AI. Let's kind of fast forward to that. What role is AI playing in your branding strategies? I mean, you're kind of hinting around at that. And how is it evolving?
I mean, it's incredible. It's truly insane to me what it's capable of. And I'm really approaching it with a lot of optimism right now. I think that's basically all you can do versus a lot of fear. So for us, it's something that we are trying to use in every department. So everyone here is trying to figure out how can they utilize AI to be faster and more efficient, so that they can stay, focused on higher level innovation and just higher level tasks in general. So for us, a lot of the work that we do for people, the strategy of figuring out being, which is like after a 4-hour discovery process, a lot of that we're doing ourselves. But when it comes to the tactics, like when it comes to like, I need 12 emails, for example, I am going to start with AI. Absolutely. So that I'm never starting from a blank page anymore. And that's why getting clarity on these things in the beginning is so key. So, for example, one of the exercises that we do in your brand being process is identify who you're for, down to a very granular level, because we need to know what keeps them up at night. What kind of pain are they experiencing that would make them take action to buy from you? And so getting clarity from, even if it's just the owner, or sometimes it's like a leadership team, right? And there might be, opposing views about who we're actually for. Or I hear this all the time, like, we're for everybody who like reads, or everybody who eats out. That is not going to work. We really force people to choose one demo, one brand advocate. Then we create a story about them, like we story tell about them. And then when we upload that to AI has all this substance on who you are, what your services are, what you call them, what makes you different, and who you're for. So now it can just execute on this extremely high level, as if you were to say like, I'm at 1.2 million revenue right now. Next year, I want to get to 2 million. How am I going to reach? How do I best reach Elizabeth? Elizabeth is our brand advocate, and it will literally, get super strategic with you. Then you can say, okay, you think I should be using LinkedIn? What should I do on LinkedIn? What should my YouTube strategy be to reach Elizabeth? So without giving AI all of this information, and without making sure that you are literally on the same page as the tool, it's creating a lot of times like word salad. Like, I know people will often say like, oh, I can tell if it's AI. And I would say, well, you're not doing it right then. Because you cannot tell. You cannot tell if it's done well. And I've gotten emails. I just got an email the other day from someone that wants an internship that was clearly AI. So I know what you're talking about when you can feels like AI, but then you're just not feeding it enough nutritious information for it to be able to execute for you.
Yeah, that's so true. I have really enjoyed it. And I know, similar to the marketing realm and HR, people are really afraid it's going to take their jobs. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you've been begging for a seat at the table for like a million years. This allows you to do that. This
Yeah.
allows you to get out of that tactical space and use your brain, which is so
Right.
exciting for me. I love seeing it. So I think in a lot of fields, if we can just think positively about it, the sky is just so blue, in my opinion.
I agree. Yeah. Think creatively about how to use it.
Yeah. So let's say you're taking on a new client. How do you approach the branding process for them kind of at the start?
So, assuming that someone is signing up for brand being, which, like I said, that's our cornerstone product, and we do charge 35K for that. So, that's an investment for a lot of people. But let's assuming that is what they're here for. We start with a 4 hour discovery, and that is a truly pivotal point in the entire process. I mean, it's like the gold that we're going to mine for the rest of the 10 to 12 weeks that we're working with you. And so that discovery has to be extremely well run by someone with a lot of experience, typically in brand, and someone with a lot of really good interpersonal skills. Because it can feel almost like therapeutic. Like we're asking you to tell us, why you do what you do, very purpose driven led conversations. And so most of the time that means going back in time to your family of origin or maybe stories that kind of formed who you are. And I think we're exceptionally good at that. After that, we come back and present to you what we believe, what we heard. And often, I mean, I always joke we have like a 90% cry rate because I think a lot of
I
people.
cried in mine. I did tear up in mine because you just nailed it. So yes, I'm a statistic, I guess.
Yes. Well, I think a lot of people feel seen for the
Yeah.
first time or maybe understood for the first time. And that's such a beautiful part of our job, like such a gift to get to be there when people see that. Because I always say we're just holding up a mirror. It just might be a mirror you're incapable of holding because that outside perspective is so critical. So then we're going to identify that the vision, purpose, and values. Then we move on after that's approved. We're going to move on to positioning, which is your point of difference, your target market, and then, where you meet your target market. This is where we start to get tactical. And then that last component is personality, which is what you look and sound like, is all based on those first two components. So who you are is the heart, who you're for is positioning, and then the magic is where we meet in the middle. So what you look and sound like needs to feel like a representation of you, but it must be attractive to the end user. And this is one of the greatest misses, I think, especially in smaller companies under that 10 million mark. I often see that because often those were small businesses started from the ground up. And when they're owner founder led, we often build the brand around ourselves. So what do we like? And actually, one of the best examples of this is like in those more blue collar spaces like construction or carpet cleaning. But think about who mostly is buying those services, right? Oftentimes it's women, or whoever it is. It's probably not the operator of the construction company or the carpet cleaning service. And so that's like one of the biggest misses I see people make. And you don't need me for that necessarily. Well, and for one thing, our workbook is downloadable for free on our website. Please download it and you can see our entire process. But within there, it kind of walks through that brand advocate, asking you to draw out who they are, what they believe in, what they care about, what other brands they align with, what car do they drive, do they have a dog? Certainly, we need to know how much money they make so we know if they can purchase our services in the first place. What do they read? Are they on social media? You have to do this to be effective in marketing. And if you think that you can be for everybody, I always use this example of Walmart, which spends $1 billion a year on advertising. One of the only brands that tries to be for everybody. Money would say they don't even do that well. That's another podcast. But I would say, if you just think about $1 billion a year on advertising. So most small businesses, we're talking 50K, 100K, 200K. So you need to be laser focused on who you're for and do not have FOMO. Like if you want to, think of it as a bullseye. They're the center of the bullseye. You're going to hit a bunch of people on the outer rings, but without that focus, you will not be effective. Like something I always tell people is like, we have a female, Elizabeth James is who I named this fake brand advocate for us, and we work with mostly men. Now, I would just say we bring the right men to the table through our communication and our brand. We bring in a man who's, obviously wanting to work with a female-led team. So that's how it's not like we have a big sign out that says no men. And I think people are afraid of that. They're like, well, I can't just target men or I can't just target women. It's like, you must is what I would say. A bit of a hot take.
No, I love that. It's making me think of, I was sharing with you before we got started that I had a couple of different marketing folks, and I noticed recently my color palette is pretty masculine because that's my style. And that's who I'm trying to reach. It's mostly male business owners and they need help with human resources. And usually female business owners are a little more open to that. So I'm trying to reach the companies that don't have that service and haven't prioritized it in the past. Well, I've noticed that my brand has gotten a little wavy recently. It's using a lot of my secondary colors, which are like a beigey pink accent. And so I reached out to my marketing person, was like, hey, we're getting a little soft, but that's her style. And so her style is coming out. And so we've had to draw back into like, who are we trying to talk to? I need you to pull back out that navy and that sage. You know what I mean? Like I miss the charcoal. That's who we're talking to. And so, yeah, gosh, that's so, so important. And something that needs to be brought up with regularity and not shelved.
Absolutely.
It's like all the time. Who are we talking to?
But such a good example, Kerri, of how you are able to leverage the brand and the strategy, not just, I don't like that beigey.
Yeah.
And that's very powerful because it's not just, this isn't subjective. This is strategic.
Yeah. And like your organization, I don't know if you're all female still, but we're a team of females. But that doesn't mean that we're trying to market to just females. For us, we're trying to market to men. And so I've got to like hold that tension because every once in a while I will have someone say, do you work with companies owned by men too? And I'm like, almost exclusively. But,
right.
Because the way our brand comes across sometimes. So yeah, it's good to like bring that back into the forefront.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about a time where you or your team has taken a firm and helped them transform because of this process with their brand.
Definitely. I mean, I would say two stories come to mind. One is, I don't know if people have heard of Scout and Nimble. So locally, that's a really incredible brand that was grown here in Missouri, but they're a nationwide company. And I think this is just like such a testament to how hard it is to see the label from inside the jar. So we started working with them a few years ago. And at that time, they were just Scout and Nimble. And they were serving, so they're a e-com home store, but they were serving designers as well, so that designers could go in and buy like a whole house full of furniture and interior design that space. And when they came to us, we were like, this is so confusing that you are an interior designer and you serve interior designers, because that's kind of a conflict, right, in itself. And then we also have this like e-com arm. And we suggested that they break off an interior design firm called Bodine White, which we named for them. Jesse Bodine was the founder of Scout and Nimble. And so Bodine White is the interior design arm of Scout and Nimble. But, before that did not exist as its own standalone brand. And it provided so much clarity that they started receiving 4 times the inquiries to the interior design firm. Because I think that so many people were like, oh, and you're also an interior designer yourself. That's just a lot to communicate. So I think sometimes with clarity like that, and then of course it was really inspirational to the team as well. For them, we did this entire internal launch party, which was really cool too. Like, hey, we know this is scary that we're launching a new brand, but it's really harnessing the power of that. And I know they felt like that was like a really worthwhile endeavor. And another one is much smaller and more local, but I just love this story. So my little girl goes to a Montessori school, Windsor Street Montessori, and we're in kind of a succession moment. A lot of times we work with people at that moment where it's like either an owner transitioning away, selling, or family coming up to take it over. And it's like this change moment. And what this was one of the longtime employees purchased the company from the owner, which this has been around for over 30 years. And walking her through that process, which is very daunting and intimidating, and kind of like standing beside her as she created this incredibly powerful brand, which is so much more than just like the logos or the colors, but also like what she believes in and what sets her apart, was just this incredibly transformative experience for her. And that school has doubled in size. So this idea, and she said, she texted us to say, I just filled my last spot. This was within 4 months of launching the rebrand too. So very quickly. And she said, like, everyone who comes through the door is already aligned, because everything that they're taking in is so powerful and so like on brand that when they come through the door, they already know what to expect and we're already aligned. So I think that is so powerful. And the idea that we might have impacted her life positively, and of course, for all the kids at the school too, who now, what would have happened if that owner just would have shut down? I think that's such a sad thing for our community, but also for all the kids that will be impacted in the future by this like incredible school that I think just needed. I love that line that we say about like, we're not just changing how the world sees you, we're changing how you see yourself. That is, I would say, the absolute honor of this job. Seeing someone tear up because they see themselves differently, or maybe see themselves clearly through your eyes for the first time, is just such a cool gift.
It is. And I'm trying to even remember, and I need to go back and read mine, but at some point they were explaining my brand in like one sentence, and it was like humble strength. And that's like tears just like came out of my eyeballs. I didn't have a chance to think about how that felt or anything. And I was just like, is that the way you see me? I didn't know that. Good. I'm so glad. Yeah. But like, I didn't realize that I was portraying myself in that way. That is how I want to portray myself. So, yep, you're spot on. It's such a beautiful process, and just honestly something that I think every organization should go through. It's so powerful. So other than not doing that process, what are some of the common mistakes that companies make when it comes to branding, and what do you recommend?
So I really do think, so number one, I would say that identifying because you don't need, like, I would say to anyone who's like $35,000, which I do hear that every week, that I'm not that offended by it anymore. That's why our workbook is free. So I believe in this so much. Like, please download our workbook and use it yourself. And like, I don't know, ask a friend, ask someone, like you, Kerri, who can, give them some feedback. You don't necessarily need an outsider to do this digging. I just want you to do this digging. So identifying your vision, purpose, and values, I think, is essential if you want to be around for a while. And I mean, I've heard from people all the time, values are bullshit, or that's just stuff up on a wall. No one actually adheres to that. I think that's totally wrong. I think that the legacy brands that you and we all know, they have that. And if you don't think that they do, I would just say you're wrong. You're absolutely wrong. So I would say you must do some of that soul searching for yourself to define who you are and what you believe in and why we're here beyond the bottom line. So that's something too. The purpose cannot be to become a $5 million company, because I could have become a $5 million wedding, invite provider. I mean, maybe, but that doesn't get anybody out of bed in the morning. So the purpose needs to be much bigger than that. And then the other thing I would say is do this exercise on who you're for. I think this is somebody at Main Street asked me, what brand juice do you see left on the table all the time? And that is something that I know, I thought that was such a good question. That is something that I cannot tell you enough how much I hear that. We cannot commit to one brand advocate. Like, no way. We're too big. You just don't understand our business. or we're B2B, we're not B2C. We can't commit to one. Well, those are just people too. Those are just people at that business that you want to work with. So that is something I get so much pushback, and I am just ride or die about this mechanism of like, you must figure out who you're for and you commit to them. So that's what I would say, like, do those two things and things will really start to come together.
Yeah, and I heard you say earlier, your avatar essentially has a female name or whatever, but you attract men, and so it's not like you won't attract the opposite gender or different people. They'll just be aligned in general.
Absolutely.
That's super interesting. I hope you're just changing people's minds right now.
I hope so too. Although I always said, like, if I got hate mail, at least it would be male. So please send your emails to me about how I'd really love to spar about this too, because I
Yeah.
think it's like, to me, this is the key to unlocking effective communication for any small business. Now, I'm not working with Coca-Cola, right? Although I'd be interested to know, like, how much this mechanism can scale. Because to me, it would still be essential that, okay, so Nike's actually a really great example of, like, obviously an enormous brand. And I always give that Colin Kaepernick ad example. Like, you
Yeah.
can Google that if you're unfamiliar with what it is, because that is a risk they are willing to take because they know who they are and who they're for. And obviously, they're willing to alienate people um, in the process. And so that is just, to me, that comes down to knowing who you are and who you're for. So probably some of these really large brands even have this mechanism in place, but this is essential if you have a limited marketing budget.
Yeah, it helps you step all the way into yourself too. I feel like the more that I have narrowed down, the more confident I get with my perspectives, my opinion. And so, yeah. So, how would you measure the success and effectiveness of a good branding campaign?
I mean, I definitely think it's really critical as far as like a rebrand goes. I think that's really hard to measure. But if we're just talking about a campaign, typically a campaign would have metrics around it. Like, so for example, Como Gives is a campaign that we do, or that we did last year and we will do again this year, which is just a campaign that runs for a certain amount of time. And then it has a very specific metric. Last year, they raised $2 million for the first time in their history. That was especially powerful because giving was down across the board in 23, but they managed to like outperform their previous years. So I think that with campaigns, there typically is a very hard metric that we are gunning for, either in dollars in sales, click throughs, follows on social media. It is important to identify those metrics before we launch, so that, and I would tell a marketing person, you want those metrics. Like, the metrics are scary because they're going to hold us accountable, but they also prove your value when it comes to talking about, a raise next year. If there was never an agreed upon measure of success, marketing is one of those spaces that can be really hard to prove the ROI immediately, unless it's agreed upon what we're going for. Are we going for brand awareness? Are we going for sales? And another thing I would say, I think that this is a hot take. I would love to, like, fight with the media person on this. Like, a lot of times you'll have media people will really push for, like, these deep discounts to push transactional sales. And you will not, there is no margin in that original, because we had to pay to acquire them, right? This cost to acquire. However, if we have loyalty, if we have brand loyalty, because they actually know who we are, they didn't just click on the first link that provided the best deal of the thing that they wanted to buy, that's where margins are. That's where all the growth is. So I always say margins are in brand. All of your margins are in brand, because when we have a perceived value, that's when we get to charge more. I mean, why do people want iPhones when you can make the argument that Android is a better product? But it's because Apple's brand crushes Android every time in every study ever done. So, like, if you want to be able to charge more for your services, for your product, you must invest in brand.
Yeah, the only two, I've been in business for a year and a half, so not very long, but the only two clients who haven't made it to the finish line of the first contract have been two clients that started out with a discounted work. And gosh, I wanted to work with them. And I tried to meet them where they were at, and neither one of them made it to our contract terms or 90 days. That neither one of them. Now, every other client that I have has been a minimum of 9 months. Like that's our average client length, even though we've got 90-day contracts. So all my clients that are aligned, we're a long-term relationship with them. I mean, I've got a couple of clients that have been with me since the start. We're a year and a half in, and I don't see any end in sight. But
Yeah.
like those two that started out on a discount, and I was changing what I was offering, they flopped, and they were pissed at me, honestly. And I should have fired them from the beginning. Then they ended up firing me. It was a great learning experience, and I'm glad that it happened because the very next time someone came around, I was ready to be like, nope, nope, I'm not doing that.
I think that happens so often. Like the people who, and I think that's also unfortunate. The people that it's like a major stretch for, there's almost no way to deliver on the value that they are looking for when they might have overextended themselves, right? I'm not sure if that was the case for you, Kerri, but like, yeah, I mean, all the time we find that the people who are paying us the least are the squeakiest wheels. And they demand so much attention. And the sad thing is they take it away from the people who actually help you move the needle, evolve.
So what would you recommend to a business on how they can stay up on latest trends and innovations in this branding space?
Ooh, that's a good. I would sign up for Parliament, which is this newsletter that we do. Honestly, that's a really good. There are a couple people that I follow online, and sadly, like I don't even know, they just kind of come up in my feed.
Yeah.
As far as, I definitely read a lot of like entrepreneurial magazines and stuff like Forbes or Entrepreneur. To me, I just kind of try and stay aware. Someone just suggested to me that I follow, it's the editor of Entrepreneur Magazine on LinkedIn. And he does something really interesting. I can't even remember his name now. It's something like Josh something, but I absolutely love what he does. It's basically like all case studies. Like he'll say, like, look at something that, look what Tropicana just did and how this has changed their business. But it's like all super data driven and very like just all case studies. And in my understanding, he has nothing to do with any of the work. He's literally just like an outside observer, like a journalist. So I feel like it's really, really well done. Yeah. But I truly believe, I'm really passionate about this stuff. And so we really are trying to put out really high quality content around brands specifically. So I think if you like what you heard here, then please do follow us on Parliament, which is our newsletter that comes out weekly, and you can sign up on our website. And I would highly recommend anyone download our brand being workbook too, because it truly is. It's free. It's the whole process. It walks through our entire process.
Yeah, and I will link both of those, the place to sign up for Parliament and the brand being space from Hoot's website, on my show notes. And we'll make sure we'll get that out on social media too. Kristen, I've loved our time together today. Anything else that you'd like to add or to say before we close?
No, thank you so much for having me on. And I'm always happy to talk about this stuff. If anybody wants to DM me, I know you'll post where we can be found, but I'm K to the G to the B on Instagram. And then at Hoot Design Company is our Instagram as well.
Okay, awesome. This has been the fastest 45 minutes of an interview I've ever done. I could talk about this stuff all day long, and you and your team have been such a wealth of information for me and my organization as we've gotten started. It has really been formative. Folks, we know that some of these thoughts are difficult because they're not natural to a lot of us unless we live in the marketing space, unless we live in the branding space. This is hard to wrap our minds around. And it's also hard to step out of our day-to-day business and spend time working on our business instead of in our business. And so I understand that that is tough, but this is work worth sacrificing for. And so I would just say, don't waste that chaos, embrace it. Till next time.